And it's good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel. Plenty happening in sport, but I thought, first of all, gentlemen, we'd go to the arms out controversy. I did some review of the rules of the game, in particular the AFL, laws of the game, and looked up Regulation 18, which deals with umpires. Umpires shall be protected from unreasonable contact and behaviour whilst performing their duties, and their decisions should be respected. Umpires shall award a free kick against players who use abusive, insulting, threatening or obscene language towards umpires, or behave in an abusive, insulting, threatening or obscene manner towards an umpire, or dispute the decision of an umpire. Now, the question for the panel is arms out abuse or dissent? Throw it over to you, gentlemen.
Well, can I start, Professor, and say that it's not? They're two different things. I just know what dissent is, because there's no definition in the rules. In fact, this is a rule which has just been thrown in at the last minute this year. The league came out in January and talked about the new rules they're going to have for 2022, and they're in relation to holding the ball and time delay. Nothing to do with it. So this is a Brad Scott invention, incorporated allegedly into that rule. Dissent means holding or expressing an opinion at variance with those officially held. So if you say to an umpire, sorry, sir, I am quite convinced that was not a mark, well, that's actually dissent, and it's a 50-metre penalty. Now, that is absolute BS. If that's the way they're going to describe this, we know what abuse is. Abuse is like a platypus. It's hard to define, but when you see it, you know it. We know what abuse is, but dissent is a natural reaction to a wrong decision. And that's to say that that's now 50 metres, and also, Professor, to say that this is going to fix up the umpire shortage, that's a lie. When I did a survey a couple of years ago about umpires and why they were leaving, the number 8 reason was abuse. 6% of the reasons, and all this nonsense about it's already made it better for umpires. Well, that's just BS. I mean, it's only been going for 2 weeks in the country. So my opinion is that this is going to make it worse for umpires particularly in suburban and country leagues, which the AFL, of course, don't worry about. But imagine being an umpire now with a hostile crowd. Somebody does this. The 50-metre hasn't been awarded, and the poor little bastard's got to give a 50-metre penalty or be absolutely abused by the supporters. This is a disaster of Brad Scott's making, and it has to be fixed, Professor.
Professor, is it an overreaction to a problem that they let manifest itself over many, many years? I think that's the best way to describe it. You know, you had some players who were downright, just going off their troppo, going off their trees. And if they had paid some 50 metres with those type of dissents, I don't think anyone would have complained. But now to come out and just say the open arms, if you go like that, half the times you don't know what a free kick for. A ruck free kick in the middle. Half the time the ruckmans look at one another, then the umpire to see who's going to get it. So the arms out is certainly an overreaction, but I do think that it got to the stage where the players were just questioning free kicks even when they were blatantly there. And
Gelding, one of the worst offenders was Brad Scott, by the way. One of the worst offenders of the day was Brad Scott. But we're talking about... We
were joking, John, and this is one for you. What about Chris Scott and Brad Scott when they were coaching in the coach's box? They're always throwing their hands up in the air.
Oh, yeah. But it's... Gelding, isn't the problem abuse? It's not dissent. Dissent is a disagreement with an opinion. Abuse is where, we know what it looks like. That's the problem. But what they've done is they've attacked a different problem, and that's what's creating the problem. I think, Professor, is that I couldn't agree with you more. You cannot abuse an umpire. But just saying, I disagree with you, sir. Or what the hell was that for? Well, that's just asking the question. And in fact, over the last few years, guys, you'd know this, the umpires have been explaining their decisions to the players. Jeff Crouch would never do that back in the day, but they've been saying, this is why I gave that free. I think that's a good thing. But now that discussion is over. So that, I don't know, what you call it, free-flowing information between player and umpire is now over. So now I think it's going to make it worse for the umpires.
Well, I've given you my view. I think it's an overreaction to a problem they created themselves. But, and it is noted, you gentlemen have been involved in local football, in tribunals and as chairmen and things like that. I thought the problem with getting junior umpires was, firstly, pay. And that seems to be the problem. And that's where the AFL can filter down some more money to help pay for this alleged missing of 6,000 umpires. I don't know where that's come from, but they've obviously got a figure. Surely they need money to help pay for these umpires and then to coach them in the proper way, in the rules and things like that. And then certainly do have 50 metres for dissent and abuse, but make sure it's just not the hands out.
Gelding, it shouldn't be dissent or abuse. It should be abuse, in my opinion, because there's always going to be dissent, and long may there be dissent, because sometimes umpires get it wrong. And I think it's appropriate that this pointed out to them, particularly by the captains of the side, you've made a bad decision. But, gee, that is entirely different, 100 miles away from being abuse. And it has been let go on Gillian Cochran's watch. Well, John, I'll go so far as to say, Professor, this is making the game almost unwatchable. From my point of view, I'm getting sick of it. And all you're worried about now is, when's the next free kick going to come? When's the next 50 going to come? When are we going to have a goal scored against us by some dubious free kick and then 50-metre penalty?
Well,
John, I would have thought at 5-1 you would have been quite happy watching football at the moment.
Well, yeah, I wasn't with the Mackenzie bloody. If you saw that Mackenzie 50 metre, if we lost that game by a goal or less, I'd have been particularly disappointed. Professor?
All he was saying was it touched the ground.
Mark?
Yeah, John, I'm a bit off topic here, but you're talking about umpiring and expecting a decision. One thing I did detect in your game the other night was I was watching and listening to the umpire. GWS had several marks in their back 50. The GWS player didn't deviate off the line, but the umpire called play on. Now, and that was immediately after the player had got to the extent of going backwards away from the mark. So there wasn't any time delay, but this one particular umpire, as soon as that player walked to the back of how far he was going to be away from the man on the mark, he immediately called play on. Now, how can the umpire call play on in a position like that? There's no play on there. And, of course, that then triggers the man on the mark running at the player, and then the player going back thinking he's got time to deliver the ball, suddenly being under pressure to get rid of it.
I saw that, Professor. There's at least 2 occasions where I was bemused, if not befuddled, about it. And I think it's getting to the point now where the players don't understand the rules.
I don't think the umpires understand the rules, John.
Or the umpire, well, that's where it comes from. And they're just worried. And you can almost see it in their faces. Have I done something wrong? Am I putting my hands up? It's really becoming quite unnatural. And I've always thought Aussie rules at its best is a very good free-flowing game. Well, it's not anymore. I hate to see how many umpire decisions there are in a game now compared to, the Jeff Crouch days, but I think it's ruining the game. Yeah. Honestly ruining it.
When you talk about arms out, Gelding, and I look at the laws of the game, there's only 2 places that can could possibly come within the laws of the game, because there's no definition of arms out. Why would there be? And as John correctly pointed out, there's no definition of dissent. So the umpire shall be protected from unreasonable contact and behaviour. So it would have to be deemed to be unreasonable behaviour, or it's also for disputing a decision of an umpire. So now we're talking about arms out being disputing a decision. Now, disputing in the normal course of using the word is arguing. You're arguing about the decision. So if you say nothing and just put your arms out, how are you arguing with the decision?
Well, I would.
How is that unreasonable behaviour?
I would argue to say that if you go like that with your arms, it's not arguing, it's just questioning, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, which is a big difference. And I just found it funny, Brad Scott coming out and saying arms out is dissent and will be paid as a 50-metre penalty and things like that. And you look at the way he played football, they were always questioning umpires under Matthews. And, it was just there. And look, what I was going to go on, if I could, Professor, and maybe get Delegan's view on this, the rugby league players have the captain go and approach the umpire and they talk about it. Now, and you hear them talk about it, and half the times what the captain say is nothing what has happened on the ground. They just try and put it in their best light. So I don't know what the correct answer is. Maybe hands out, you're allowed to question an umpire's decision, but as I said, I think the AFL's gone too far and said now that you can't question an umpire's decision.
Professor, the job of Brad Scott is to get the game being played well in accordance with the rules. I understand that they have a different interpretation of the rules. He's making a new rule on his own. What he is saying, this dissent business, is actually not part of the rules. As you said, Rule 18. So all of this, arms out is 50, that's actually not in accordance with the rules of the game. And the league's actually at risk, I think, of A, being made a mockery, and B, somebody might even take it on, just say it's actually not part of the rules. And it's not. So it's actually legal, in my humble opinion.
Talked about the announcement that there's already been a trickle-down effect to grassroots. BS, Mark.
That's
from Travis Old at the AFL.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity of going into this with a grassroots official.
Yep.
And he says it's way too early to make a statement like that.
Right.
Now, that's somebody who's at grassroots, right?
Yep.
He also says he has concerns that it will marginalise grassroots umpires even more because grassroots players won't understand this way of dealing with things.
Totally right, mate. It's only been going 2 weeks, most of the grassroots footy. All saying that he's seen it. Well, how many games can he actually possibly see in the last 2 weeks? So that's just nonsense. But it will, as I was saying earlier, it's going to be murder for young umpires and young boys, young girls who are, now umpiring, where they don't understand the rules because, as I say, the rule is actually not a rule, and they are going to get smashed by the people, the dickheads on the outer, who are going to say there was dissent. That was 50 metres, and it's going to get ugly out there. And I think they need to sort this out quickly.
Yeah, not necessarily. Yeah, the umpires won't probably have a problem with grassroots from the grassroots players. It'll be the grassroots spectators.
Absolutely, no worries about that. As you know, Mark, in the country, I'll let you know what they think, and I'll let people know what they think pretty bloody quickly.
All right, John, thanks for that. And Gelding. Paul, NRL round 7, not attracting the same controversy or controversy as the AFL. All started on Thursday night, and Schooner wouldn't have been happy with the result of the Sharks Sea Eagles match.
He wouldn't have been. What we're seeing is a very impressive Sharks team. And I did say that I caught up a while back with Robbie Kearns at the Storm launch. and he couldn't even get a coffee with Craig Fitzgibbon, the Sharks coach, unless it was 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning. So that's how committed Craig Fitzgibbon is. He's gone through the pathways. He's done their coaching apprenticeships. It's really good to see the Sharks playing well. And Nico Hines from the Storm has just been a revelation. Manly were in the game late, but not enough to just overcome what is turning into a Sharks juggernaut. But I've got to say, I also enjoyed the Brisbane Canterbury match, not as much as you might have, Professor, not. For this reason, and it sort of shows me is that that's what the Rabbitohs are missing. And Adam Reynolds turned on a masterclass of football. And when I say enjoyed it, didn't like the result for you, but it shows you why you don't put Napoleon on a battle-by-battle deal. And it's why when you have a man like that running your army, you need to keep him on contract and you need to make sure that he stays. And he's looking at you, Melbourne Storm, for Cameron Munster. What's going to happen there? But no doubt, as Wayne Bennett, as we speak, is probably sharpening up his pencil and talking to the bean counters at the Dolphins. And they're going to offer Cameron Munster a deal that he just can't refuse because he's been asked to go from $1.2 million a year to $700,000 a year. If you watch that game, you would wonder why that man is being offered a pay cut because he turned on the best performance of this round so far. He was unstoppable. He was unbelievable. And it was exactly what makes the Storm great. And yet they're offering him a $500,000 a year pay cut. So you tell me how that works, Professor.
Well, Schooner wasn't happy Thursday night. I certainly wasn't happy Friday night. And I agree about Adam Reynolds. Good to see that Josh Addo-Carr scored a double and Matt Duffy found the try line again. But there's 15th place on the ladder, and then there's Daylight, and then there's the Bulldogs.
Well, that's it. And you saw, I mean, they say it's a simple game, which we know it isn't, but in some ways it is in terms of just running a team well. And he's not flashy. He's one of the slower blokes on the paddock, but he got it done. So I can't see what's going to happen with the Bulldogs next year. They're in play for Munster, perhaps. Phil Gould often gets his man. So we'll see what happens. But they need a solution in the halves because Matt Burton, who was supposed to be the creative attacking genius, can't do it all on his own. So he's just looking a bit shackled there. And the Broncos made them look second rate, unfortunately. My tip for the Wooden Spoon looked very good North Queensland last night. I've got that wrong and I've got the egg on the face. I don't mind saying that. They're looking very impressive. They belted the Titans. So maybe there's another team on the Gold Coast who isn't performing well, Professor. We could add that to the 37 who've tried in all codes to date.
Is it too early? Is it too early to call the Gold Coast gone?
They're not looking good, and it's sad because I did want that team to do well as one of the few teams ever to have made it work on the Gold Coast. But it doesn't look like they're going to be the ones. And I'm looking now at the markets for betting. It looks like a Panthers Storm grand final, the way that the bookies are looking at it. So we'll see what happens. But those two teams are looking just very impressive.
Another game last night that I found to be most entertaining, Paul, and that was unfortunately your Rabbitohs, so you're not happy as well. But Michael Mcguire's West Tigers out of jail yet again by one solitary point, and for the second week in a row sank the Professor's parlay.
And also, too, a great redemption story, Jackson Hastings playing number 7. They moved Luke Brooks, who's supposed to be their organiser. He's looking great since he's moved to number 6. He's earning his $1 million a year. And the West Tigers, and I love this about my sport, is that you can have a basket case, just turn it around and go bang, bang. So I'm just wondering if you'd see that from the Suns or whoever the worst team is in AFL. I just couldn't see it happening. So I do love when a basket case, alleged basket case, can come back and do what they've done. I didn't mind it as a football fan, seeing the West Tigers win and the real emotion on show.
Now, I thought that your point about Adam Reynolds missing from the Rabbitohs couldn't be more effectively brought into exposure than the last 5 minutes when the Rabbitohs had at least 3 opportunities to win the game and muffed each one of them.
And that's right. It's a simple game in many respects. You just need someone who owns the game, controls it, and gets it done. And you saw that from Adam Reynolds. So we've got a young kid there, I can't really see too much yet, but the jury's still out. And it's a very successful, powerful club, but we won't be threatening this year. And I had my premiership 7 years back now, and I think that might be it for a while for the Rabbitohs.
Is Michael Mcguire now relatively safe?
Well, he might even have the support of the board times two, because there's been 2 wins and they were absolutely gone for all money. I wouldn't have put $1 on him surviving, but he's had 2 very good wins and he looks quite happy about it, as he should. And the F-bombs now are F-bombs of joy as opposed to F-bombs of fury. So you've got to be happy for him, because it is a brutal game, and we know this in all football codes. Coaching is incredibly tough, and he has had everyone questioning his abilities, and he's done it. He's got 2 very good wins. So they were calling it a masterstroke, and that's not words thrown around regularly by likes of Greg Alexander. Hastings in at 7 and Brooks at 6, and we always talk about how important halves are. It seems that he's got 2 halves who are firing, so well done to him.
So does that put Trent Barrett now firmly and squarely in the hottest seat in NRL?
Oh, you have to be. You saw his press conference. He looked like a man on death row. He really looked like a man out of answers, and he wasn't physically there, but I could feel the shadow of Phil Gould behind that sponsor's background, and he might as well have been holding an axe, because Phil Gould is not a man to hang around waiting for things to turn around. So you're going to find that you'll get some good players next year. Kick out from the Panthers, but what you really need is that half combination, and that's exactly what's turned the West Tigers around, is settling on 2 good halves. So just interesting on that. Wayne Bennett has got his number 7 for next year, Sean O'Sullivan, whose dad, if you don't mind, is the recruitment manager for the Dolphins. So that could have been quite tricky negotiations. I think he was asked to wait outside. Peter, just outside for a minute, and we'll just sign your son up. So it's not really bums on seats signing Sean O'Sullivan. I query whether the judge or guilty have even heard of him, but that's their general as of now. But they're sharpening up an offer for Munster, probably 1.2 or 1.3 million a year. Living at Moreton Bay, life could be worse for Cameron Munster. You'll see it happen very soon.
Today's games, Paul, the Knights and the Eels at 2:00 now. Before we start talking about the game, the Knights with a big announcement during the week that they'd re-signed Kalen Ponga. So there's another player who didn't make it to the Dolphins.
It became a bit of a circus, and Wayne Bennett apparently didn't even find out till the press conference. So there's a bit of talk in rugby league circles. They could have at least given him the courtesy of saying, which is what most managers do, is to say, we're not going with you, we're going to stick with where we are. It might be because his dad's his manager. Not quite the Cloak scenario where you had to buy 3 brothers to get one good one, but the manager is his dad, and he didn't give Wayne Bennett the courtesy of saying, we're knocking back your $1 million a year, but thanks anyway. So it's a big signing for the Knights. You've seen how impressive he's been. That game is one worth watching, but the other ones are all paying $7, the other 3 games that we've got coming up, and I wouldn't touch any of them, the underdogs, in the next 3 games we've got coming up today and tomorrow.
So both Knights and Eels disappointing last week. Who do you think will win that one, and why?
Well, the Eels should win, but the Knights will be fired up on the back of the Ponga signing. So I think the Eels should win on class alone. Maybe 20-16, I'd have it, but it's going to be a good game. But the other games, you got Penrith up against the Raiders. Raiders $7, wouldn't touch them. Tomorrow, which is always a big night of football in Anzac Day tradition, you've got the Dragons, $4.25. I wouldn't touch them either against the Roosters. At 7:00 tomorrow night, you've got the Storm $1.10. So unfortunately, in what is quite a close competition, there's 3 games with big odd outsiders, unfortunately, big odds.
So you wouldn't be suggesting that Kevin Yap should take the $4.25?
He can, but not with my money. He can do it with his own cash. I think the Roosters will be too classy. Yeah, it's just a shame that those games are so one-sided in what is a pretty close competition.
The Storm signed 2 players during the week, Paul. Tariq Sims from St George for next year, a 32-year-old. Do you think that that's an investment in the future?
No, they've had more men down than Saving Private Ryan. So they need to add some troops to Storm, and he is a good honest player who'll get it done. And Craig Bellamy has a record of getting guys like that in and perhaps delivering him even a premiership. So they're just filling a hole with him, and he's a good signing.
And the other one was a player I hadn't heard of, Jay Chan from the Catalans Dragons, a 20-year-old forward.
Never heard of him either. So, yeah, they know what they're doing though, so I'm pretty sure he'll probably turn into a superstar.
All right, for those who are perhaps having a bet on the results, Paul, and as we always say, gamble responsibly, what are your thoughts on the final scores in the Panthers, Dragons and Storm games?
I think the Panthers will do a number on the Raiders. I think that might be 26-10 for the Panthers. The Dragons will be fired up for Anzac Day, but I still think the Roosters will be too classy. I'd say that might be 20-12 to the Roosters. And the Warriors always fire up for that Storm game, but that Storm team is just looking explosive at the moment. So I think that could be 26-10 to the Storm.
Okay. Now, did I hear a report during the week, Paul, that you've already made the bookings next year for the opening round in the NRL?
On the Sportsfan Radio budget, I hope. Is that business class, the flights? But I would love to get over to the opening round, LA. Russell Crowe's played a large part in that. The Rabbitohs playing the Manly Sea Eagles, not at that stadium where they're hosting the Super Bowl, but at a 25,000-seat stadium in LA. A lot of promotion, a lot of publicity. Let's see if it works. I'm sure it'll be better than the AFL's foray into China, Professor. I can say that.
What are your thoughts on that, Judge?
I think it makes absolute sense. And if you're going to go to America, go to where they actually understand what a blockbuster is. You know, Hollywood is in California. Americans know how to do this kind of stuff. The Chinese would be just bemused by our game. But the Americans will get it. Well, personally, with respect, Paul, I think they'd get AFL better, but I think they'd see some synergies with their own football game. And I think that this is another, I'm not sure, I presume this has got Volandis' hands all over it, Paul, but this is another genius move, if you ask me, because that's a market that will appeal in America, whereas China and New Zealand, forget it.
What it is, Americans love the fact that they play without pads. They just cannot believe how hard they hit. And it's like they think they're crazy. They think they're absolutely mad, these players. So they love the gladiator aspect of it. And it's appropriate that the gladiator himself, Russell Crowe's behind it. I'm not saying it's going to own America, but it will be more than a novelty, I'd say.
I agree. Paul, can I just ask a question without notice? I think last year you guys went from 2 referees to 1. And that's still the case now, is it?
It is, but there's a lot of reliance on the bunker, so they pass a lot of things upstairs. But so that slows down the game a lot. There's decisions where you think that the referee should make the decision on the spot, but it's almost like they're gun shy, and they'll send it upstairs to review. But
in terms of physically able to do it, is one referee physically able to referee the game?
I haven't noticed any drop off in terms of going from 2 to 1. So the game seems to be in good hands. The bunker hasn't been as bad as they were last year. They've sharpened their act. So I don't think that it's impacting the game adversely, having the 1 and then passing contentious things upstairs.
Yep. Okay, thanks. Gelding, you were going to ask something.
Yeah, I just had a question for Paul. More about Munster and Melbourne Storm with the drop in pay of $500,000, Paul. They know he was going to get big offers from other clubs. He caused them a lot of trouble and angst at the end of last year after the finals. Is this just the way they're going to get rid of him? Is it that simple?
No, it's you can't, I guess, have them all. So what it is that they prioritise Jerome Hughes, which surprised a few people. But he is a good, honest halfback who's also probably the best ball-running halfback in the comp. They've kept Pappenhausen and they've kept Harry Grant, who I've said for years now will be Australia's captain one day. So the problem is they had 4 to keep and they've prioritised 3. But when you go from 1.2 million to 700,000, as the Scottish say, forgive me, you can't polish a turd. There's no way to dress that up. That is a massive pay cut. And the sad thing is that if you watch the Storm, he is their best player. So I think they've made a decision.
knowing full well that he's worth 1.2,
Yep.
out on the general market, and his contract's coming up. To me, it just seems, we want you, but there's the door for what you caused last year.
Oh, not at all. They'd love to keep him, and he may well stay because it's a choice. You know, you go to Redcliffe, you go to the Dolphins for 1.2 a year for 5 years, massive money. It's a great part of the world to live. Or you stay and you win premierships, which the Storm will in the next 5 years. So it is a real choice, but he's got a young family, and that's often the case. It's not that they want him to go at all. There's no one with half a brain at the Storm who want to see Munster go, because he's just, well, sadly for the Storm, since they've shaved his contract or offered to shave his contract, he's been on fire. So they've prioritised Jerome Hughes over him, and that raised a lot of eyebrows because it's an X factor, Munster, as opposed to a good, solid ball-running halfback. So if you watch the Storm games, there's one player that you love seeing, and it's the bloke that they're offering a $500,000 a year pay cut to.
But is that always, and you see it a lot in AFL too, a person that's coming out of contract seems, and when they're on the edge, they seem to have their best year while negotiations are being taken place, and while the papers are speculating what they can get elsewhere. And as you said, you mentioned in your segment today, you mentioned Munster twice for the Dolphins and the Marks team.
I think with him, without getting too deep about it, he's had some gambling problems and drinking, and he's got his life in order. He's had a baby. What it is, not necessarily playing well because look at me, I'm available. He's got his life in order, and you're seeing a guy who loves the game and he's playing to the best of his ability. So the Storm might even be a touch frustrated that we've stuck by you at your worst and now you're at your best. This is our offer. Take it or leave it. And I think he will leave it. And I think he will leave and become Wayne Bennett's marquee signing. And that's the sort of guy who'll get bums on seats.
I
agree with you.
Yeah, gentlemen, that's a good segue to one of our other topics, and that's that the AFL broadcast contract is up for negotiation, and two streaming services, Amazon and Paramount, have said they want in to stream AFL matches. That's on the back of Channel 7 ratings being down by more than 18% compared to 5 years ago for the first part of this season. Fox Footy ratings are down by 13%. It seems to be that there might be room for them coming in, given the fall off with Fox Footy and free-to-air, but it must be a threat to us being able to see free-to-air matches on the TV. What are your thoughts, gentlemen? Is it a good thing or bad thing?
I think disruptors are always a good thing. And if Peter V'landers has shown anything in sport, disruptors produce results. I think the AFL has been pretty much sedentary when it comes to broadcasting rights. They toss it up between Channel 7, Channel 9, bit of Foxtel here, bit of fluffing around the edges. I think there's some serious difficulties out there in broadcast land in terms of eyeballs. And I think that this is actually a problem of Gil McLachlan's. Well, he's just going to leave. But the new guys coming in, I think they're a good thing. They're international companies. Paramount CBS, which owns Channel 10. I can see Channel 10 coming into the picture more and more. I've long said this. AFL is the best football game in the world. I know you're going to get an argument from bottom left here from Paul, but I honestly think AFL is competitive in any market in the world, and it's actually been abandoned in terms of international coverage because the AFL, I don't think they're interested, but I think it's a massive appetite for our game, and I think America's an obvious market. So I just think that hope the new head of the AFL sees the potential, and that's reflected in this new agreement. In fact, I wouldn't like to see Gil McLachlan do this broadcast deal. I think the new AFL CEO should be appointed, and that person ought to have genuine experience in broadcasting, streaming. So that's the real problem. The game runs itself pretty much until they try and stuff it up with Brad Scott. But it actually goes pretty well. The commission are all absent. I mean, they play no role. If they get a person who understands streaming and broadcasting, I think could be the best thing to set the AFL up for the next 20 years.
Just on that, Professor, and John's point about America being the market, I know my stepson goes out Friday nights to sports bars in LA, and he's a North Melbourne fan, and many times you will get the Saturday afternoon game on one of the 25 televisions in the sports bars. So it is there, and it has got a following in LA already.
Yeah, and
there's a lot of expats.
But that's despite the AFL's efforts. It just takes
Exactly.
It's just such a bloody good product.
Exactly. So these streaming companies coming in, the more, and it's a way of the future, you know, the way everything's going now, streaming, and you have to pay for it if you want to watch it and things like that. It just seems to be the way it's going, and the way to spread football outside of Australia rather than these one-off games.
If you ask a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old what free-to-air means, I don't think they know what it means. They think of their sport coverage entirely differently than we do and what we've grown up on. You know, we've been grown up on Channel 7 football. Gee, I mean, look at KO. I mean, you don't need to start. There's so many variations on the theme now. There's so many different streaming markets that it's exciting, but I don't think the AFL gets it. Paul, what do you reckon?
Well, the rugby league is rating well, and there's KO is doing great things with league. So I love their little snippets you can pick up. You don't have to wait for the game to be on. You can access it, and even the minis as well I love. If you haven't seen the game, you can watch a bridge version of the game. KO is doing some great things for rugby league. So I think the sky's the limit in terms of streaming, and that's how people watch the games these days.
Big time, Mark. Pretty much, I think it's and plus COVID, AFL was one of the few sports to and rugby league were two of the only sports in the world to be fully going last year, for instance. So I've got no doubt we've got new eyeballs anyway watching the game. So it's a perfect time when the world's sort of still stuck in COVID to do this broadcasting deal.
So, Judge, what do you think the broadcasting deal should be with these new players coming in? And extra money, an extra way to view it and things like that. Should the AFL, what kind of ballpark increase should they be looking for? Because all you heard when the CEO was leaving was he'll do the deal and it'll be a great deal that'll set football up again. But, really, new players, competition, what should we get for it?
I couldn't put a dollar value on it because I'm not with the minutiae, Gelding, but clearly, given the expanse of the sorts of new streaming services that are available, which are just going to increase exponentially, well, I'd say you'd have to look at an exponential increase in the broadcasting deal. To me, it makes logical sense.
Well, just on that, John, in that article about the streaming services, if you read far enough down, there was a discussion about what the Players Association has asked for with respect to increase in wages for the AFLW. They've asked for a 107% increase, which I saw that the article described as being, or the writer of the article described as being huge. Now, 107 might be a huge increase, but they're coming up the
low
base.
Pretty low base. Also interesting, Professor, the players, the men players said that's fine. It's not coming out of our share. That's off the table. So it's good to see the girls, but you're on your own, girls. Professor, we've talked about this many times. This day was always going to come where the rubber hits the road in terms of what the AFL think the women's game is worth, and no question it's been undervalued. But that's why they'll need this extra money to make it anything other than a hit fight coming up.
Yeah, exactly, John. The average wage for AFLW players at present is under $28,000 a year.
Right.
Now, the national minimum wage is around $40,000 a year if if the AFLW do get the 107% increase, that'll take the average wage to over $56,000, which basically puts them just above minimum wage.
And the AFL are the sort of buggers that have the temerity to say, well, they're only playing 8 games a season, so why should they? When they are the very people that are dictating how long the season goes for. This day is coming where there's going to be a real reckoning with the women's game, I think, Professor, and it's probably going to be sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Another topic, Judge, that I might swing in because we're talking about this, and Gelding mentioned it, that since we were last on air, the CEO of the AFL, Gillan McLachlan, announced that he would be standing down at the end of the season. In all the articles I read about people tipping who might step into his seat after he leaves, I was amazed there wasn't one mention of a woman's name. Have we made so little progress that a woman still isn't considered able or suitable to lead the AFL?
Absolutely. Look, I'd love to see, Professor, and quite apart from the fact that we, promote women's sport, women in sport, and have always. Just imagine a woman coming out of somewhere like CBS, Fox, a streaming service, a capable woman from Amazon, one of those companies that actually understands youth, understands the eyeball market, streaming services, television, broadcasting, all the rest of it. That would be the perfect person. You look at the dinosaurs that have gone, and the usual suspects, I'd call them, that have been put up. It's a lack of imagination. It's certainly a lack of any suggestion of a woman. And I think it's actually ridiculous that none of those names that you and I would imagine would be put up have been put up.
Professor, help me out here. I'm not too sure of the lady's name, but I thought the president of the Western Bulldogs has been mentioned as a possibility.
Yeah, might have been
more not a probability, a possibility.
Yeah,
that's all.
Gelding, in the articles I read, right, as opposed to watching on TV, in the articles I read, as John said, there were all the usual suspects: Brendan Gale, Travis Auld, the bloke who I can't remember his name, who's Dylan, the counsel for the AFL. They were the first 3 names mentioned. Why wouldn't we lead off with a woman's name? I just don't understand it, because in my humble opinion, there are more than enough women who are qualified to sit in that chair.
Yep.
Well, I know Peggy O'Neill's done a great job at Richmond.
Yes, Gelding, exactly. Look, you've just got to look.
Brendan Gale seems to get all the plaudits, but it's happened under her watch.
Well, how well are the 3 teams that have female presidents going? They're going pretty well.
Yes. Yep. And heard the Melbourne president talk at the opening of the AFL season this year, and she spoke very impressively on both men's football and women's football.
Yeah, funny about that, isn't it? Maybe, John, if a woman was appointed to the CEO, we might get a different view on how the AFLW is going to progress.
There would be a massive change, Professor. You wouldn't know where to start if there was an actual. But you look at the board, so the AFL Commission, and they're missing an action, and it's very remote control the way they control the game. It's actually it always has run itself. It needs to have, I think, not just because of tokenism, it would make a massive change to the whole culture of the AFL. But as I say, not only be a female, but be a female who knows broadcasting. I think that's the biggest issue for Gil McLachlan at the moment, and that's why I think he should hand over now to that person while this broadcast deal's being done. Otherwise, they're going to lock it in for 5 years, and I reckon they'll undervalue it.
Paul, you might recollect that we spoke with Lynn Anderson on this program last year. She was known as being the chairman of the Canterbury Bulldogs for a period of time. Apart from Lynn, are there any other women that you're aware of who've been chairman of the boards of any of the NRL clubs?
There was a Tigers former chairman. Remember, there should be more, obviously, and behind that. And it would take some of the egos out of the game and the alpha male testosterone-fueled behaviour. It would be good to get more women in the game at higher levels, definitely.
By the way, Paul, just to correct you, it is chairman, it can be woman, because the man in chairman actually refers to the Latin word manus, hand. It's actually the hand that controls the chair, and it's non-gender. So you can actually use chairman for both male and female. There you go. Bit of trivia.
You might have just lost some of the rugby league listeners with that, but no, I'm with you, all over it.
That might not have been the only listeners we lost there, Paul.
I thought Marnus was that Rain Man cricketer, but anyway, so that's another thing.
Labuschagne. Yeah.
Labuschagne.
Hand. So his name is Hand Labuschagne.
That's right, Hand Labuschagne. He's got good hands too, so it's appropriate.
All right. Given we're talking about cricket there, Geldy, we might come to you with a little bit talk about racing. You had a question you wanted to put to me, apparently.
Yeah, Professor. Excuse me. Just in relation to some of the tips from GM on that racing yesterday, Professor. I know we were talking about off air. Jokingly, I liked two of Damien Oliver's rides on Sirione Miss and Sportzfan yesterday, and then decided not to go against them because Damien was on two favourites, and I think we've highlighted a bit of his record on the favourites at the moment. I think we could say Gelding, he's got an unfortunate record when riding favourites. Yeah, and not saying he didn't ride them well, but unfortunately they don't win. The favourites, they don't seem to win. I just wanted to know what you thought of his ride on Arcade in race 5, Professor. Yeah, Gelding, let me just say that that was a 2,000 metre race, wasn't it? That was. Yeah, at the 1,800 metre mark, I figured that we didn't have a chance. Oh, no, that was an 1,100 metre race, sorry. Oh, it was 1,100? Yeah. All right, well, at the 1,000, I didn't think that we were going to win. Right. From a 9-horse field, it was in 7th place most of the way on a track favouring leaders. Yeah. Yeah. On pace runners. I didn't like that the horse was eased back for two reasons. One, it's an 1,100 metre race at Caulfield, and you find it very difficult to win from the rear in an 1,100 metre race. And secondly, the threats to that horse of winning were all ahead of it. And so our horse had to make up a fair bit of ground. So, yeah, most unfortunately. Some interesting. I know you gentlemen like some facts, so I'll just give you some facts from yesterday's results. As you know, I'm a bit of a push for Jamie Carr and Damien Lane at the moment as our leading jockeys. Damien Oliver had 4 rides, 2 on favourites from a 9-race program. Best result, he had 2 places, a second and a third, and 2 unplaced runners. Jamie Carr had 5 rides, 2 on favourites. Both won, and she had 3 winners for the day. And Damien Lane had 6 rides for 1 win and 3 seconds and 2 fourths. So they just for the punters just to follow on and just where they're going for, and just little facts and figures that I like to watch in racing, and hopefully we can take advantage of those things.
Gelding, you've probably seen, I don't know, 100,000 races in your life. Roughly, I don't know.
Yeah.
A lot?
Yeah.
Of the race that you've seen, you have a fair bit of corporate knowledge in your head. What do you put down to the horse? And what percentage is down to the horse? And what percentage is down to the rider? So I want to know what importance the rider is in horse racing. 80% horse, 20% rider?
Yes, you've got to have the motor underneath you, but then you've got to be able to put that horse in a winning position. You can have the motor underneath you, but if you get it buried on the inside and you can't get a run, no matter how good the horse is, they're never going to do it. And some horses that probably haven't got the motor need everything, the ride to be perfect for it to have a winning chance, John. So, look, I work on the fact I like the horse first, but I would probably look at it as being 2/3, 1/3, 60-40, 2/3, 1/3.
60 to the horse, 40 to the jockey.
Yeah.
You don't reckon that's a bit high for the jockey?
No, because, and again, this is not taking anything away from some of these young apprentices that come and ride, John. The horse may run an extra 30 metres in a race. So, that horse has to be, so much better than the other horses. When you're talking, as you said, the difference sometimes between winning and losing is that photo finish, that little nose, and if your horses, had to run an extra 20 metres, and that's kind of come, or if it's in a position to win a race, pulled out at the right time, or if it's got to make up too much ground, no, it's very significant, I would have thought.
Professor, as you know, I get my racing knowledge off Francis the Talking Mule, so I've got no idea. I've never actually heard anybody put a figure to what they think the value of the jockey is. Gelding's done a lot of races, and that actually amazes me. That it's as high as 40%, and I accept what he says. That's incredible.
Well, Professor, your view,
Yeah, I'll give my view, but before I do, Paul, you haven't seen as many races. I'll make an assumption here. You haven't seen as many races as Gelding. What are your thoughts on horse percentage jockey in a race result?
I'd put it a third on the jockey in that they can ruin a race. If it goes out like a greyhound, the show's over. And it's almost like when we used to play those motor racing games with the turbo button. If the jockey presses all the turbo buttons too soon, what you find is that the other horses just come over the top of it. So a jockey can ruin a horse's chances, definitely, even if it's a Ferrari amongst Corollas. You can often see, and we do see it regularly, is the Ferrari doesn't always beat the Corollas.
Okay, Mark, what's your figure?
Well, let me give you an example first. And this is an example very close to Gelding's heart. Gelding has an interest in a horse which, at its best, might be a Saturday afternoon metropolitan horse in a race.
Off-season race.
Yeah, but in an off-season race. Not a stakes horse, correct, Gelding?
Yes, probably more a midweeker.
Yep. Now, I've followed the results of this horse and I've watched the races very carefully. So I know the ability of the horse very well. I've also seen what riders can do with that horse and what they can't do with that horse. And I think it's fair to say that there are at least 3 races that I've watched where the positioning of the horse has cost that horse the win in a race.
Right.
Now, for pedigree and for results, in a results-oriented sport, those 3 results mean a lot money-wise in the hip pocket. So the choice of a jockey is crucial, and I'll tell you when it's crucial. It's particularly crucial where your horse needs to be given the best possible ride to actually succeed, because if it doesn't, it won't.
Paul, that game you were thinking about was Mario Karts, and I normally take Donkey Kong. The reality is that Donkey Kong's got as much chance as every other kart in the race, and I'm not very good at it. And I'm not very good at the race, and Donkey Kong usually comes in the last 2 or 3. That is entirely jockey error. So that goes to your point. And I never know when to put the afterburners on. It's always the wrong place. I end up afterburning.
Well, to compare it with like greyhound racing, for example, you could bet on the best dog in the race, but it crumples up like a spider, because it's been knocked over. That's very different to horse racing, where generally, and this is where Moonee Valley has a lot of critics with the short straight, you have a lot of critics that say that the best horse doesn't win, but I've met jockeys who've said, we know what we need to do is get to the front on the corner, It's a short straight. But at the same time, it's very different to greyhound racing, where you've actually got someone in charge of the actual animal. So that's where it's massive. It's at least a third, I'd say.
So Paul, was your division 1/3 the jockey, 2/3 the horse?
Yes, yeah, at least, yeah.
So in answer to your question, gelding and judge, jockey, in my opinion, over 50%.
Over 50? Wow.
Well, John, I suppose the best way to describe it is sometimes when we talk about track bias, you may have a bias for front runners and that. So only so many horses can be at the front. So then it's a choice of some jockeys then say, well, I've got to get to the front no matter what. And exactly what Paul said, they will burn the britches off this horse to get to the front, and I'll have nothing left for the 200 metres to come. And that's when something will run over the top of it. So it's a matter of the good jockeys know where to place the horse, know how to read a race with pace, and also take in the conditions of the what's going on around them to ride the perfect race. Jimmy Cassidy was one of Giraffe's favourite jockeys. Jimmy Cassidy was fantastic. When he'd been in a bit of trouble and was coming back, there was no better jockey. But when he was flying, the trust factor may have been kind of missing on some of the things. And, so my horse, as Mark said, needs the perfect ride to be a winning chance. So if something goes wrong in the race, which is jockey orientated, count it out.
Professor, that means, to just listen to you guys, and I hear what you say, that when you have the race form guide, apart from the form of the horse, you should also have the form of the jockey, as in last night he had a bowl of pasta, he had a good night's sleep, he didn't fight with his missus, he hasn't done anything stupid over the last week, he hasn't been drinking for 4 days or whatever, because all of those factors that affect a jockey's performance are pretty relevant to a horse race. If it's in your case 50% or 1/3, that's a massive influence on the race, and you never get that information at Sportsbet.
John, but you do after Gelding and Paul and I, the amount of times we look at results and who was riding, and in That's Racing, I'll often, when I'm talking about the horses that I'm
just lost John
selecting, look at how the jockeys have been going over their last 50 rides, so that you're picking a form jockey. And so when I look at a horse with a certain jockey on, regardless of whether I think the horse will win or not, I will put something towards how the jockey will affect the horse, and I won't select certain horses if they're ridden by certain jockeys. And Gelding and I had a discussion about it yesterday, and my thoughts about yesterday proved to be correct. That jockey didn't ride a winner.
Yeah. So, John, if we look at yesterday, as I said, we were looking at Jamie Carr and Damien Lane. In our tips, 2 of them were Jamie Carr and things like that. Jamie Carr and Damien Lane rode 4 winners out of the 9 races. So, anyway, there it is. Professor, do we want the tips?
Yes, Gelding. Let's have the tips. We'll finish the show with the tips.
Okay.
Oh, the judge has decided he hasn't paid the electric bill. He's gone. You've upset him. You've upset him, Gelding.
I've upset him. He maybe better pedal a bit harder to get that electricity running. Professor, Ballarat races today, a soft 5 track. Look, a pretty light day, Professor. Haven't got much. We might save our bit of ammunition for tomorrow at Flemington for the Anzac Day meeting, but we'll use a few of these bonus bets that we've got. So we like race 4, number 4, Charm Destiny, trained by Danny O'Brien in the maiden, and with John Allen aboard, a very good jockey, especially on a course like Ballarat. And then we'll go into Race 5, number 2, Footlights, trained by Trent Busserton and Natalie Young, excuse me, and ridden by an informed jockey of Geordie Childs. So just the 2 bets today, Professor, in a nice little parlay, but I do note Mark the Horse was an emergency in race 7, Professor, number 16. So if you want your Roman bet, you can go that way. But just the 2 tips, race 4, number 4, and race 5, number 2.
Have you got anything for us today, Paul, or are you keeping a low profile?
Oh, no, just the rugby league I'm looking forward to seeing. So it's very good for the Knights that they've kept Ponga. I think they'll fire up. It'll be a good game.
All right, gentlemen, on behalf of the judge, thanks very much for your efforts today, and I'll wish you all a very good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Professor.